It's just before 5 in the morning on a quiet street in an American suburb. A tow truck rolls up with its headlights off. The driver doesn't check the house number. The license plate is already on his screen. He backs up to a pickup that still smells like the showroom, lifts the front wheels, and pulls away. No shouting, no knock on the door. A few minutes start to finish. Last year, by the industry's own best estimate, that scene played out about 1.7 million times, the most since 2009, the bottom of the Great Recession. Except, look around. There's no recession on this street. So what is this? You've probably seen the headlines. Millions of Americans are returning their new cars. Here's what nobody says out loud. You can't return a car. There's no returns counter. There's no 30-day refund on a pickup truck. What's actually happening is stranger than the headline, and worse. Those cars are being handed back, keys on the counter, or taken, like this one, before sunrise. And here's the part that should stop you cold. A lot of the people watching their truck disappear down the street will keep paying for it, for a car they no longer own, for years. How does that happen? 4 clues on the table. A $100,000 truck that died twice, once before the factory fix and once after. 2 lines on a chart crossing quietly where nobody looks. A billion-dollar lender that collapsed overnight and burned $500 million of big bank money on the way down. And a tired man in Phoenix who tows away strangers' cars for $350 apiece, and who knows better than anyone how it feels when everything you own disappears. By the end, you'll know exactly how a person hands back a nearly new truck and still owes $11,000 on it. And you'll know who gets paid, quietly, at every single step, each time it happens. Because one of these sets of keys could be yours. To understand that driveway at dawn, you have to go back 100 years to the moment America made a promise to itself. The promise was simple. You shouldn't have to be rich to drive. 1919. General Motors does something no car maker has ever done. It opens a bank. They call it GMAC, a finance company whose only job is to lend you the money for the car it just built. The terms feel almost quaint now. 1/3 of the price up front in cash, the rest paid off in 12 months. 1 year and the car is yours. The most famous car maker in America wants nothing to do with it. Henry Ford hates debt. Hates it the way you hate a personal enemy. So Ford launches his own plan. You hand your dealer $5 a week, week after week, and when you've paid the whole price, you get the car. Save first, drive later. It flops spectacularly. It turns out Americans don't want the car after the sacrifice. They want the car now. By 1928, even Ford gives in and opens a credit arm. 2 years later, 2 out of every 3 cars in America are bought on installments. The promise has a payment plan. For half a century, that plan stays on a short leash. There's a document from the Federal Reserve, spring of 1972, that reads like science fiction today. Back then, 85% of new car loans lasted 3 years or less. Loans longer than 3 years? Less than 1%. Your parents, or their parents, drove cars they actually owned. Then the leash starts to stretch. 4 years, 5, 6. Today, according to the analysts at Edmunds, nearly 1 in 4 new car loans in America runs 7 years or longer. A record. And 7 isn't even the ceiling. Some credit unions will now write you an auto loan for 96 months. 8 years. Here's the problem with that. The average financed car comes back to the dealership after about 4. The loan has started outliving the car. Why did the leash stretch? Because somewhere along the way, the question in the showroom changed. It used to be, what does it cost? Now, there's really only one question left, and every salesman knows it. What's the monthly? And the monthly has to stretch because everything behind it has grown. The average new vehicle in America now sells for just under $50,000. The average payment? Around $780 a month. 1 in 5 new car payments is over $1,000 a month. And the payment is only the beginning. Car insurance is up more than 40% in 4 years. Gas, parts, registration, the whole cost of simply having a car has tightened around the household budget like a belt pulled 2 notches too far. Here's the thing though, you could just not buy one, right? Walk away. Take the bus. Look at this parking lot at 4 in the morning. Night shift workers, home care nurses, warehouse pickers. In most of America, there is no bus at that hour, no train. The car isn't a luxury here, and it isn't really a choice. It's the ticket you buy to get to work, and you buy it on credit, at whatever the monthly turns out to be. That's the country the promise built. 100 years on, the promise has fine print. And in the fine print, something else has been quietly going wrong with the cars themselves. Start with one man in Illinois. In court filings, his name is James Powell. In 2023, he buys the truck of the moment, a GMC Yukon Denali 6.2-liter V8, the kind of machine that costs as much as a starter home used to. Within a year, according to his lawsuit, the check engine light, a knocking sound, and when the oil comes out for inspection, metal shavings, pieces of the engine, in the engine's own blood. Powell wasn't unlucky, he was early. Inside General Motors, the reports had been piling up for years. When federal regulators later forced the paperwork into the open, it showed the company had logged more than 28,000 complaints of these engines failing over 4 years before the recall came, half of them with the vehicle in motion. The problem, in the company's own filings, connecting rod bearings that could be damaged by debris, and crankshafts machined out of spec. In plain words, parts built wrong at the factory. April 2025, the recall finally lands. Nearly 600,000 trucks and SUVs, Escalades, Tahoes, Silverados, Yukons. And here's where the story turns from a defect into a decision. For most owners, the fix is not a new engine. The fix is thicker oil, a different grade, a new cap, a new filter, a note in the manual. An engine with a factory defect treated with an oil change. GM says only about 3% of inspected trucks need the engine replaced. The other 97 drive home with the same heart and heavier blood. Did it work? This is where the numbers get hard to look at. Since the recall, regulators have collected hundreds of complaints from owners whose trucks failed after the fix. 499 of them at last count. 26 of those had received a complete replacement engine, a new heart, and it failed too. GM's own tally of post-repair complaints runs close to 7,000. 3 days ago, the Federal Safety Agency escalated a formal engineering analysis covering 997,000 vehicles. Call it what it is, nearly 1 million trucks under investigation for what happened after they were fixed. And it's not just engines. Some of these same trucks carry a separate recall on the transmission. The rear wheels can lock up while you're driving. The remedy? Not a new part, a piece of software that watches the wear and warns you up to 10,000 miles before it happens. Sit with that for a second. Your truck now ships with a countdown, not a repair, a warning that the failure is scheduled. Ford, meanwhile, has been setting a different kind of record. 152 recalls in a single year, the most of any car maker in American history. One case tells you the style. Nearly 700,000 Bronco Sports and Escapes with fuel injectors that can crack and leak gas onto hot metal. 8 fires under the hood. The remedy? Not new injectors, a software update, and a drain tube to guide the leaking fuel away from the parts that catch fire. The owners went to court. The consolidated complaint against GM runs 389 pages, and its core claim is one sentence. The remedy was, in the plaintiff's words, egregiously inadequate. GM's answer, also on the record, deserves its say. This was a supplier defect, not a design flaw. Inspections are free. Replacement engines are free, and the company extended the engine warranty to 10 years or 150,000 miles. No verdict yet. A judge will decide. But before you swallow the easy story, they don't build them like they used to. Hold on, because the data says something stranger. The average car on American roads is now almost 13 years old. A record, double what it was in the 70s. Cars, on average, have never lasted longer. Engineers will tell you what's really happening. Emissions rules and fuel targets have pushed engines to the edge of their own physics. Thinner oil, tighter tolerances, more heat, less margin. When it works, it's a miracle of efficiency. When something's off at the factory, it's off in a million copies at once. The machines aren't built worse, they're built closer to the cliff. Which leaves the question Powell's lawyers keep circling. When the fix is an oil change, when the fix is a drain tube, when the fix is a countdown, who is the repair actually for? Follow that question into the one room of the car business where nobody ever loses money. It's not the factory floor, it's down the hall, past the showroom, behind the door marked Finance. Every dealership has 2 rooms. The showroom, with the lights and the coffee and the balloons, that room is for selling you the car. And then a smaller room down the hall where they send you after you've said yes, the finance office. That room is for selling you the money. And the money has better margins than the metal. Here's the trick almost nobody knows, and it's perfectly legal. When the dealer runs your credit, the bank comes back with a rate, say 6%. That's called the buy rate. You never see it. What you see is the rate the dealer writes down, which can be higher. The gap between the two is called dealer reserve, and it works like this. The bank keeps the 6, the dealer keeps most of the rest, and you pay the total. Researchers at the Federal Consumer Bureau measured it across tens of thousands of loans. The average markup was about 2 percentage points, and roughly 3/4 of that money went to the dealer. 2 points on a $50,000 loan over 7 years. For the 10 minutes you spent in that chair. Then comes the menu. Gap coverage, the insurance that pays the difference if your car is totaled while you're underwater. Sounds prudent. It costs the dealer about $250. It's sold to you, on average, for over $600. An extended service contract? Nearly double what the dealer paid for it. Window etching, paint sealant, protection packages. When the Federal Trade Commission moved against one large dealer group, the finding was blunt. 83% of customers had been charged for add-ons that were never authorized, or slipped in with a lie. $10 million in penalties. The menu survived. Could anyone stop the rate game? Someone tried. After regulators fined Ally Financial $98 million because those invisible markups were falling hardest, statistically, on Black and Hispanic borrowers, the Consumer Bureau issued guidance to rein dealer markups in. The industry went to Congress, and in 2018, Congress voted the guidance out of existence. Not amended, erased. The lobby didn't win an argument, it won the referee. And the finance office is still only half the building. Remember the room where the money never sleeps? Service. Parts and repairs are about 13% of a dealership's revenue and roughly half of its profit. $164 billion a year flows through American dealer service departments. Read the balance sheet cold, and the conclusion writes itself. The car out front is the bait. The building behind it is the business. Which explains the strangest war in the industry, the war over who's allowed to open your hood. Independent shops and repair advocates have been pushing a federal right to repair law for years. The Dealers Association opposes it. In Massachusetts, 3/4 of voters forced car makers to share repair data, and the car makers sued and lost. And this June, in the Oval Office, President Trump told reporters that GM and Ford had asked him for a bill to limit who can fix their cars. His reaction, in his words, "I said, that's strange, I've never heard of that." The companies didn't confirm it. But the fight over that hood is real. It's in Congress right now, and the prize is that $160 billion room. One last floor up, and the back office becomes the whole company. Because the car makers learned the dealer's lesson decades ago. Don't just sell the car, own the loan. Today, GM's lending arm quietly delivers about 1/5 of the company's profit. And Ford? In 2025, Ford's factories, the actual car business, lost billions. Ford Credit, the lending arm, made $2.6 billion, its best year in a while. Henry Ford, the man who thought debt was a moral failure, built a company that now leans on the loan book when the assembly line bleeds. The machine found its perfect product. It doesn't rust, it doesn't crack, there's no recall. The loan. Almost perfect anyway. Because a loan has one moving part, the person paying it. And a few years ago, millions of those moving parts got put under a pressure nobody had planned for. It started, of all places, with a shortage of chips the size of your thumbnail. Before the chips, before the pressure, there's a place worth standing in for a moment. December 2008, the desert outside Las Vegas. A stretch of dirt along the interstate, and on it, 15,000 cars. Rows and rows, sun-bleached, dead quiet. Every one of them repossessed. Every week, 1,000 dealers came out here to bid on other people's broken plans. That year and the next, more than 2 million American cars went back the same way. The last time the driveways emptied out like they're emptying now, the crash nearly took the money machine with it. GMAC, the same lending arm General Motors invented in 1919, had to be rescued by the United States government. $17 billion of public money to save the bank behind the cars. But the strangest number from those years is quieter than that. Researchers at TransUnion went looking at what people stopped paying first when everything was falling apart. The mortgage went first, the credit cards went next, the car payment went last. People chose the car over the house because you can sleep at your sister's place. You can't get to a shift without wheels. Hold on to that, because it means a car crisis doesn't look like 2008. It doesn't crash the evening news. It's the bill people fight hardest to keep paying. So when they finally can't, they're already out of everything else. Today, the borrowers with good credit are paying like it's any other year, and the borrowers at the bottom are missing payments at the worst rate in over 30 years of records. Both things are true. That's what makes it silent. 2 lines on a chart will show you how the silence works. (2021). A shipping crisis on the other side of the world runs the car industry out of semiconductors, the tiny chips that run everything from your windows to your brakes. assembly lines stop. That year alone, by one industry estimate, nearly 8 million vehicles are simply never built. Dealer lots go empty. Orange cones stand where the trucks used to be. And then something happens that the car business had never seen. Used cars, machines that have done nothing since the day they were bought except lose value, start going up. In 1 year, wholesale used prices jump nearly 50%. A 3-year-old Camry sells for close to what its first owner paid. It's a world turned upside down, and it feels, briefly, like free money. So America trades in. People walk into showrooms holding the one asset that's ever appreciated in their driveway, and they roll it into something newer, at sticker price, sometimes above it. Dealers stop negotiating. There's a waiting list for the privilege of overpaying. Rates are low. Stimulus is still in the checking account. And the monthly? The monthly fits. Lenders approve almost everyone, and why wouldn't they? In that market, a repossessed truck is worth more than the loan behind it. Everyone in the room signs like the moment is normal. The moment is not normal. Here's what every one of those buyers was actually signing. Picture 2 lines on a chart. The first line is what your car is worth. It falls off a cliff the day you drive out. A typical new car sheds around 20% in the first year. The second line is what you owe. And that line barely moves at first, because in the early years of a long loan, most of your payment isn't buying the car, it's buying the interest. When the worth line dips below the owe line, the industry has a phrase for you. You're underwater. You own a debt wearing a car costume. With a short loan and a real down payment, the lines cross early. And from there, the car is genuinely yours. Stretch the loan, skip the down payment, and the lines might not cross for 5-6 years. Buy at the top of a price bubble, and they might never cross at all. In 2022, the bubble let go. Used values fell almost 15%, the biggest annual drop ever recorded. Nobody's individual car broke down. The math broke down. Every loan signed at the peak sank underwater in the same year, together, silently. You can even watch the whole cycle in one company. Carvana, the used car vending machine, rode the bubble from $15 a share to nearly $400. Then fell 99% to $3 and change, with the market pricing it for death. Today, restructured, recovered, welcomed into the S&P 500. Remember that arc. In this industry, the companies get to come back from the dead. The customers underneath them, not so much. Because here's where those buyers are now. According to Edmunds, roughly 3 out of every 10 Americans trading in a car today owe more than the car is worth. The average hole? About $7,000. And the cars are coming back young, barely 4 years old, still under warranty, already drowning. And what do you do with a $7,000 hole when you still need a car? You don't pay it off, you roll it into the next loan. New car, old debt, stacked. A quarter of those underwater trades are carrying more than $10,000 of the last car inside the new one. Look at what the average underwater buyer signs next. A payment over $900 a month on a loan stretched past 6 years at a worse rate than everyone else's. The hole doesn't close. It compounds, wearing a newer car each time. And the 7-year loan, the one that made the monthly fit? Run the math to the end. On today's average deal, an 84-month loan means around $16,000 in interest alone. A longer leash doesn't shrink the debt, it feeds it. Analysts at Edmunds have stopped mincing words. One calls it, flatly, a mathematical trap. So one day, the trap closes. The job changes, the rate resets, the transmission, well, you've seen the transmission. And you make the call. You hand back the keys or the truck leaves at dawn. Now watch what happens to it, because this is the part they never show you. The tow operator bills a fee. The lot charges storage by the day. Then the truck rolls across an auction lane you're not allowed into, where lenders recover, on average, around 30 cents on the dollar of what the vehicle was worth. Every hand it passes through takes its cut. And a few weeks later, an envelope finds you. Whatever the auction didn't cover, the gap between your loan and that 30% is still yours. The Federal Consumer Bureau measured it across millions of loans. The average balance owed after a repossession is $11,300. $11,000 for a truck you will never drive again. Now stop and count. The dealer got paid twice, car and financing. The finance office got its markup and its menu. The car maker got the sale and the service. The lender collected years of interest, then the auction money, and it's still holding your debt. The forwarder took a fee. The repo agent took his $350. The auction house took its commission, and somewhere a bondholder got a coupon. Every link in the chain closed its books in the black. The only person who lost money on this car is the person it was built for. So the question changes. It's not why are the cars breaking? It's not even why are the loans failing? It's this: if everyone gets paid when you fail, who exactly has a reason to stop it? Before you answer that, come meet the man from the driveway. He has a name. Matthew Pittman, Phoenix, Arizona, 56 years old. And he's been taking cars since he was a teenager. His rig is a Ford F-350 the trade calls a sneaker, a self-loading wheel lift he runs with a joystick without leaving the seat. 2 laptops on the dash, infrared cameras on the roof reading every license plate they pass. Since 2008, he's filmed his nights for a YouTube channel called Repo. 200,000 people watch him work. This is how The New Yorker found him when they profiled him this summer. A man who works while the city sleeps. $350 per repossession. A rate veterans will tell you that has barely moved in decades. Everything else in this story got more expensive, not him. And those cameras on his roof? They're the visible edge of something much bigger. One private network, built by and for the repo industry, claims over 9 billion license plate scans in its database. Not criminals, everyone. Where your car sleeps, where it works, where it prays. Freelance spotters now mount cameras on their own cars and get paid $25 to $55 for every wanted vehicle they flag. Repossession as a gig, like delivering pizzas. And on the subprime lots, they don't even need to hunt. The GPS tracker is installed before you drive off. The hunt is over before it starts. They're just waiting for the word. The economics of the night are their own little lesson. Public radio spent years riding along with a repo man named Larry Baker, 15 years in the trade, recently retired. His summary of the career? 4 years of college, and I chose to do this. A typical job by his clock. 1 in the morning, about 5 minutes, gone before the porch light comes on. He carried a gun. He fired it twice. He had one pointed at him 4 times. And the money? The repossession gets billed out at as much as $700. The man with the truck, the one who absorbs the risk, sees about half that. An old-timer in the trade puts the incentive in 5 words. No metal, no money. You don't eat unless you hook the car. That's the piece rate that makes men take chances at 3 in the morning. And the chances are real. In most American states, this job requires no license and no training. One industry veteran likes to point out that manicurists are more regulated than repo agents. In 2023, at least 7 agents were killed on the job, a record. In South Carolina, a 46-year-old tow operator named Stephen Hughes Jr. was shot 5 times in his truck mid-repossession, and the people later charged weren't even the ones who owed on the car. Pittman knows both sides of the ledger better than he'd like. In 2016, his wife, Shanda, died of cancer, and the man who spent his life towing away other people's collateral came apart. Methamphetamine, opioids, prison. While his internet followers wondered if he was dead, the house went, the business went, time with his kids, gone. He's in recovery now, rebuilding, and when he talks about addiction, he uses the vocabulary of his own trade, the sentence of a man who has watched it from both ends of the hook. It's like a big magic trick. Everything you own disappears. Now, look at the other end of that hook. Stephanie Waldrop, Mississippi, 23 years old, a restaurant worker. Her loan? A used Ford Fusion at 23% interest, $466 a month on a $12,000 car. Then her hours collapsed, the arrears piled up, and one day the Fusion was gone. Here's the detail that stays with you. She got it back. Not because the system bent, because strangers heard her story on the radio and sent money. For every Stephanie, there are millions with no microphone. A construction worker in San Diego who starts at 4 a.m. and will tell you evenly that there is no bus at that hour. A paralegal in Washington state paying $1,100 a month for her car, more than many mortgages, while the groceries quietly migrate onto credit cards. Researchers now estimate the average car payment eats nearly a fifth of a household's monthly income. A fifth. For the machine that gets you to the job that pays the other 4. Which brings us back to the word from the headlines, returning. Here's what voluntarily handing back your car actually changes. The towing fee. That's roughly it. You call the lender, you set a time, you put the keys on the counter, and you feel, for one afternoon, like a person settling a debt with dignity. The loan doesn't care. The car still goes to the same auction, the same 30 cents on the dollar, and the shortfall still lands in your mailbox with your name on it. The surrender stays on your credit report for 7 years, filed under a different word, costing about the same. The returns counter doesn't exist even when you walk up to it politely. Washington has started to notice the machinery. This February, Senator Elizabeth Warren opened an investigation into wrongful repossessions, cars taken by mistake, by algorithm, by sloppy paperwork, writing to a dozen of the biggest lenders. Her words? A repossession is a devastating interruption of somebody's life, inexcusable when it's done in error. She's asking the questions. At the exact moment, the Federal Consumer Bureau, the referee that measured most of the numbers in this story, is pulling back from the field. An agent squeezed to $350, a borrower squeezed to her last meal. Both of them inside the same machine, both replaceable, both, in the machine's terms, doing their jobs. And the strangest part is still ahead. Because a machine this profitable was always going to attract someone who'd try to eat the machine itself. Dallas, Texas. For almost 20 years, a company called Tricolor sold used cars and the loans to buy them. 65 dealerships across the Southwest, aimed at one community. Hispanic buyers the banks wouldn't touch. No social security number? They'd lend on a tax ID. No credit score? In one of Tricolor's own bond deals, 2/3 of the borrowers had none at all. The founder, Daniel Chu, told the story as a mission, banking the unbanked, one pickup at a time. The mission paid. By 2022, Chu was buying a $17.5 million condo at a Four Seasons tower in Miami. Behind the mission, federal prosecutors now allege, there was a trick, and the trick was almost elegant. When a lender like Tricolor borrows from banks, it pledges its loans as collateral. These car payments back that credit line. According to the indictment, Tricolor pledged the same loans to more than one bank at a time. The same pickup, the same borrower's monthly payment, promised twice, sometimes more. Prosecutors say that of $2.2 billion in claimed collateral, roughly $800 million didn't really exist. Phantom trucks holding up real credit lines. September 10, 2025. The floor gives way. Tricolor files not for restructuring, but for liquidation. Lights off, everyone home. Bonds backed by its loans trade down to around 12 cents on the dollar, and prosecutors added one more date to the timeline. About 3 weeks before the collapse, they say, Chu paid himself a $6.25 million bonus and bought a home in Beverly Hills. Then came the part nobody in this story was used to. The predators got bitten. JP Morgan Chase wrote down $170 million. Its CEO, Jamie Dimon, shrugged it into a warning. When you see one cockroach, there are probably more. Fifth Third, $200 million. Barclays, nearly $150. And the bondholders, the professionals who bought this paper, are now suing the banks, claiming the warning signs were, in their words, giant red flags, visible for years. The sharks suing the whales over who should have smelled the minnow. And at the bottom of it all, same as always, the borrowers. About 100,000 families still owe payments on Tricolor loans, now collected by a court-appointed servicer, for cars bought at prices a fraud is alleged to have inflated. Some of them are discovering they don't even hold clean title to the car they're paying for, because the same vehicle was promised to too many people. Chu has pleaded not guilty. 2 of his executives have pleaded guilty and are cooperating. The government has reached for a statute usually saved for kingpins, and his trial is set for this October. Whatever the verdict, the phantom collateral had real monthly payments attached. Someone is mailing them in right now. Was Tricolor a freak event? Go one layer down and decide for yourself. In Georgia, a chain called U.S. Auto Sales collapsed, and the federal complaint against its servicer described something that sounds like science fiction. Remote kill switches, wired into customers' cars, activated at least 1,500 times on borrowers who were current on their payments. Engines shut off, warning beeps fired 70,000 times at the push of a button on people who owed nothing that day. That's the deep end of the pool, the corner of the market called buy here, pay here, where the dealer is also the bank. The Federal Reserve finally measured it this spring. Average interest rate, about 25%. Repossession rate, 16 times higher than at traditional lenders. 16 times. At that rate, repossession isn't a failure of the business model, it's a feature of it. The same car sold, seized, and resold, sometimes again and again. The trade has a word for it: churning. And these empires don't wind down, they vanish. American Car Center, 40 dealerships, closed in a single day in 2023. Customers spent weeks not knowing where to send the payment for cars parked in their own driveways. 6 weeks after Tricolor fell, PrimaLend, a Dallas firm whose business was lending to buy here, pay here dealers, followed it into bankruptcy. The lender to the lenders. The machine eating up its own food chain. Now, the question you should be asking: who keeps feeding a machine like this? Follow your monthly payment. It doesn't stay at the dealership. It gets bundled, pooled with tens of thousands of others into a bond, sliced into layers, rated, and sold. Auto loans are securitized at a pace of well over $100 billion a year now, and the buyers of that paper include the most respectable money in the world. Insurance companies, asset managers, pension funds. Somewhere, a retired school teacher's pension collects a coupon that is, in some tiny fraction, Stephanie Waldrop's $466. The bundlers take a fee, the raiders take a fee, the servicer takes a fee. The structure is built so that the top of the chain gets paid, whatever happens at the bottom. None of this required a villain, and that's the uncomfortable part. But sometimes the mask slips and you see intent. Santander, one of the biggest subprime auto lenders in America, paid a $550 million settlement after state attorneys general alleged its own internal models predicted huge shares of its loans would default, and it wrote them anyway. The default wasn't a surprise, it was in the spreadsheet. And at Exeter Finance, journalists at ProPublica documented the gentler version: courtesy payment extensions that quietly pile up interest in the background. One borrower, Jessica Patterson, paid $17,000 over 3 years on a $14,000 loan, 80% of it interest, and lost the car anyway. Predicted defaults, priced-in repossessions, a kill switch under the dashboard, and a countdown in the transmission. At some point, the pattern stops looking like a series of accidents and starts looking like the design. But hold on, because there are serious people with serious data who will tell you this whole story is overblown. And they're not wrong. Here's the case against everything you've just seen. Take it seriously, because it's real. The chief economist at Cox Automotive, the people who count the repossessions, looked at the same numbers and said flatly, this is not a crisis. Defaults actually drifted down last year. If the economy were coming apart, they'd be climbing. Borrowers with good credit are missing payments at the same quiet rate they did in 2018, around 0.4%. And the collapse that opened this story? An anomaly, in his word. An alleged fraud, not a symptom. And no, this is not 2008. Car debt is about $1.7 trillion against $13 trillion in mortgages. There's no tower of derivatives stacked on your Silverado. When a car loan dies, it dies alone. It takes a family's credit down with it. It does not take the bank. They're right, and that's exactly the point. 2008 was a machine that broke. This is a machine that works. Nothing here is failing by its own standards. The lender is covered, the dealer is paid, the bond pays its coupon, the auction clears, the repo man eats. The system doesn't need you to finish paying. It only needs enough of you to keep signing. It was engineered, refined, and lobbied into a shape where every risk in the chain slides quietly downhill until it reaches the one person who can't pass it on. There won't be a crash on the evening news. There will be a driveway at 5 in the morning, one family at a time. So carry one question out of here. It works on anything with a monthly payment. Ask, if I fail, who gets hurt? If the honest answer is, everyone in this chain gets paid either way, then you're not the customer, you're the collateral. Try it on the phone upgrade that never ends. Try it on those 4 easy installments at checkout. The costume changes, the 2 lines don't. And if you're about to sign for a car, the defense fits in 30 seconds. Put real money down. Keep the loan short enough that the lines cross early. That's the whole game. Buy the gap coverage from your insurance company, where it costs about $90 a year, not $600 in the back office. And ask the only question the room doesn't want. Not, what's the monthly? What's the total? If you're already underwater, you still have moves. Call the lender before you miss a payment, not after. A hardship plan is cheaper than a repossession for them, too. If you have to let the car go, sell it yourself. A private sale beats auction pricing, and every extra dollar shrinks the balance that follows you. And never, ever hand back the keys believing the word return. You know what that word costs now, about $11,000. One last time, the street before dawn. Same tow truck, same dead headlights, same 5 quiet minutes. But you're not seeing what you saw an hour and a half ago. You're seeing a dealer who was paid twice, a back office that made its margin, a lender collecting a coupon, a database that found the plate, a man earning $350 who's lost more than anyone on this street, and a family behind one window learning that the debt stays after the car is gone. Nobody in that picture broke the law. That's the part worth losing sleep over. The keys go back, the payment doesn't. The machine runs all the way down, and money like this is moving everywhere, under your groceries, your rent, your phone. Follow it far enough, and every price starts to tell you who it really serves. That's what this channel does, one story at a time, all the way to the bottom.